The presentation today is a mostly complete overview on Shadow Empire units. This, because it's an overview, is going to contain very few value judgments about the units in particular. It's mainly just going to be here to introduce how to read them and what sort of types you have available to you in the game. As a part of this overview, we're going to be covering an introduction and caveats to various things, mainly in relation to units, unit formation summaries for battle groups, independent units, OHQ units, OHQ unit customizers, independent unit sizes and types, OHQ unit labels, OHQ unit customizers, a very short discussion on their sizes, and if the one point where we'll have a little bit of value judgment will be sort of my go-tos at the end before we do the outro. So what is a unit in Shadow Empire? This is going to be very reminiscent to what is a subunit that I discussed in the subunit overview, one of the previous videos that I made. But units are the things you move around the map in Shadow Empire. In tabletop wargaming, you might have a platoon scale game, a platoon of subunits, right? A platoon of models that you have to move around as a unit, right? So the platoon would be the unit, the sub models, the team models would be subunits in this example. In game, a subunit is a small scale that you can be reinforced on, build on, and destroyed. A unit is a collection of those subunits. Most units will have 5 or more subunits, and tend to take additional penalties, one having 3 or fewer. I believe air is an exception there. The tabletop wargame reference is also why you may hear me refer to subunits as models. The in-game technical term is subunit. The design of a subunit is a model, technically in-game. So an entire class that you design of a subunit as a model, that's not going to come too much here in the units, but we will be occasionally discussing subunits because we want to discuss what the subunits are made of, or what the units are made out of. So one caveat here, this is a game that favors combined arms approach and maneuver warfare, and such as a large variety of unit types, even before using the customizer or the battle group options to make more. And using those options, you can basically make any combination that you want. This is an overview of units. I will mostly refrain from discussion of what to use when. This overview is mostly to present a full list of options for the preset units and how you can customize them. This overview units made using the in-game Arrays unit browser after discovering and researching all the formations in the Staff Council. So there is a small chance that RNG just said, I'm not getting that unit, so I might have missed 1 or 2 in the thing. But as far as I can tell, I think I have all the units for the discussion here. So discussing sort of what type of units exist, you have your independence units, which are your simple solo unit. A sort of derivative of this is Militia. We'll have one slide on Militia later in the presentation. You have battle groups, which are custom one-off independent units made by you. You have OHQ commanded formations, which raises a group of 5 line units and an OHQ command unit. You can then customize, you can make effectively customized versions of that using the Staff Council. I'll show you how to do that when we get to that point in the presentation. And then at the end, we have air OHQs, which are the command units for air units. Unlike OHQ commanded formations, you make the OHQ and the air units separate. All the air units are effectively independent units that you then assign to OHQs, which don't by default come, in the case of air, with line units. So independent units, we have 33 different, what I refer to as pure units, made of a purely one subunit type. There is some interchangeability in subunits, like as infantry and robotic infantry being interchangeable. There's 7 motorized units, which are foot or gun units with an added truck to motorize them, and 5 mechanized units, which are basically the same as the motorized, with 2 exceptions, which there are no motorized flak, and there's no mechanized flak, and the mechanized artillery is actually a type of pure unit. So it's not an APC added to the unit, it's a self-propelled gun. Independent units come in 3 sizes: battalion, regiment, and division. You can see on this slide here the approximate number of subunits per size, as well as what it actually shows in game. So different subunits have different sizes. For example, your infantry subunit is 100 per subunit. Your vehicles are 10 per subunit. So in the brackets on the right there is the number of subunits, the sort of stylized in-game number is the left one. Motorized and mechanized units will add a vehicle subunit per subunit that it would be towing. And this is the same when we get to the OHQ commanded line units. The same sort of logic will apply. Militia units, once again, come in 3 sizes: battalion, regiment, and division, just like independent units. Unlike independent units, these cannot be attached to OHQs. The independent ones could be attached to OHQs, and in fact, if you have an OHQ nearby, I recommend attaching them to the OHQ. They receive their food, oil, and bullets for free, but they still cost logistics to deliver them. Just effectively the militia will go and acquire their food, oil, and bullets for you, so you don't necessarily need to supply those resources. If militancy in the source city is high enough, it will upgrade and reinforce for free. Can be a bit difficult to maintain that militancy, though. Or an interesting cross between OHQ units and independent units, because they can contain multiple different subunit types, whereas your usual independent unit will be one subunit type. Or in the case of motorized and mechanized, one subunit type and the motorization. However, they are not player-made. So the game graces you with your militia units, and you get what you get, and that's what you're getting. As such, I won't go too much into depth there, because you're just going to be handed them. You don't get to pick them. Everything else in this guide are units that you make. Such as the battle group, which is how your custom one-off independent units. So if you want an independent unit with a mixture of subunits, battle groups are how you make them. They can be made out of any combination of ground-based subunits, so sadly no planes. The only rule being that the product unit has to have at least 3 subunits, and the subunits that you're taking, or the units that you're taking the subunits from, have to retain more than 3 subunits, with the exception of the SHQ. So at this point, I'm going to take a short segue into the game. We're going to show you basically the process of making these. So here we're going to show a in-game demonstration of how you can make a battle group. So here in the SHQ, I have a few different subunits generated. So we've got the example of the Abrams tank, 5 Abrams tanks, a couple trucks, a couple AT guns, and a plane, just to show that the planes can't be added to battle groups. If you click New Battle Group here, you can create battle groups using basically any custom formation that you want. This is sort of how you can make any unit you want, of any different combo you want. So for example, here we're demonstrating that you can make a combined unit with tanks, trucks, and AT guns, which is something that doesn't normally exist in the independent units. And we'll just quickly go ahead and make this unit. Like most battle groups, this unit won't reinforce. So if we lose any of these units, for example, I'll go ahead and scrap one of the AT pieces here just to show how that works. We go and scrap that one. The unit now, instead of being 15 to 15, is 14 to 14. So these units won't reinforce using the replenish troop mechanic, but you can basically make any unit you want out of the subunits here. And these units do function like other regular independent units in that they can be attached to SHQs. For example, we just demonstrated attaching to SHQ. With that, we'll go back to the presentation. And segue over. Here we are with the OHQ command informations. Each formation is usually made up of 5 line units. Technically, if you've brought them in the battle, you may have had one or more units destroyed. But when you raise them, you're raising a formation of 5 line units and a command unit. There are 85 different preset types of OHQ commanded formations available for research. By default, on Tech 3 Start, you only start with 3 of them: the light infantry unit, the motorized light infantry, and the MG infantry, which all 3 of which come with 5 line units and a command unit. Notably, the MG infantry, the command unit has no MG, so the rest of the units in it has MG. The motorized one's fully motorized. Like independent units, these formations come in 3 sizes: brigade, corps, and army, and up to 2 independent units of the same size or smaller size tier can be attached to the OHQ to gain the bonuses of the OHQ, assuming they stay close enough to the command unit. Brigade can have attached battalions, corps can have attached regiments and battalions, and armies can have any size attachment. OHQ command informations come in two main types. You have tank-based, with keywords specifying what type of tank plus what adds have been added to the units, and infantry-based, where the keywords specify the type and the number of infantry units replaced. As a side effect, tank units, the keywords are basically telling you how much the unit's been expanded by. In infantry, it's telling you what the replacements are. So here's a sort of an overview of keywords associated with tanks. Armored, destroyer, heavy armor, and light armor, with nothing else in the title, are telling you what the pure tank subunit of that tank formation is. All tank formations are hidden keyword motorized, unless it is specified as mechanized. So if you have a keyword that adds towable or rideable units that ride, like infantry or towed guns, they will be motorized unless it's been specified as mechanized. Assault on tank adds infantry and artillery. So that's the example of things that can be towed. Grenadier adds infantry, artillery, MG, and RPG. And infantry only adds infantry. OHQ commanded formations for the infantry use the following keywords. So light infantry specifies that it's a pure infantry formation. Motorized and mechanized is telling you whether it's adding trucks or APCs to the unit. Assault on infantry replaces the infantry subunits with light tanks. Siege replaces infantry subunits with artillery. Storm is the mix of assault and siege. Also, when you're trying to discover these, I believe you need either assault or siege previously researched to get a storm variant to show up. MG or RPG on infantry replaces the infantry subunits with that specifically specified subunit. Grenadier is effectively Storm, but for MGs and RPGs being added to the unit, so it adds both MGs and RPGs. Again, you need, I believe, either MG or RPG discovered and researched to discover Grenadier. You start the game with MG discovered, so Grenadier can be found pretty easily. Grenadier can be combined with Siege or Storm, in which case you need either Siege or Storm or Grenadier to discover the combined units. Heavy is double the normal amount of replacements on infantry, so you can sort of put together these keywords and sort of get deduce what the unit is for the line units in a given OHQ commanded formation. So here is two examples of the keywords in action. We have mechanized armored assault. So mechanized means that we're going to get APCs. Armored is actually the keyword for medium tanks or assault guns. Infantry and artillery is the result from the assault there. So we can go, okay, so it says mechanized, armored, assault. So assault meaning we're going to have infantry artillery. Mechanized means it's going to be having APC transport. And this is a tank unit, so armored is telling us the size of the tank. And then you can see that's basically what it looks like for the brigade size. In the case of motorized siege grenadier infantry, motorized again tells us we've got some sort of transport, in this case trucks. Siege is telling us we're going to have artillery. Grenadier means we're going to have MGs and RPGs. And infantry means it's going to be an infantry-based unit where we've replaced some of the infantry with the artillery, the machine guns, and the RPGs. And that's an example of it there in Grenadier, or in brigade size. Once you have researched an OHQ formation, you can customize the formation. So if you bring up the create custom formation decision, you'll get a decision that sort of looks like this. You can scroll it down for all the possible options. The options here on this first page are what you're going to make a derivative of. So if you want to make a derivative of the MGs, you'd click on the MG. If you want to make a derivative of RPGs, you click on the RPG Infantry Brigade, so on and so forth. The more complicated ones are more expensive to start with. The second step after you've picked what you want to customize is you'll basically get the step where it's basically confirming that you want to customize this unit and giving you some basic instructions on how you go about customizing it. This is just basically a reminder on what you're about to do. Once you click add, it's then going to give you a list of all the potential adds. You have to research the subunit and have an example subunit designed to be added to the unit before it'll show up in this list. In this list, you basically select which sort of subunit you want to add to the unit. Once you've done that, it's going to take you to the next page where it's going to ask you how many do you want to add. And this is giving you an accurate representation of how many it's going to add at the brigade scale. Well, I'll get into showing you how this changes when you upscale the unit to larger units, but it's giving you an accurate representation of the brigade scale. So for example here, if you've been following along, right, first one I went and picked, let's pick an MG infantry unit. Then we picked, let's add AT guns to it. So here we're setting up how many AT guns we're going to put in that unit. At the last step, it's going to ask you to confirm the new name. So your custom unit gets a custom name. By default, if it's doing a derivative, it's going to do the original unit 2 for the derivative. It does give you an option to rename it. In this case, I renamed it in a way that makes a bit sense because I'm adding AT units to the game. So we've made the MG AT infantry here. So I basically just added the AT guns to the infantry unit. So here's an example of the result, right? So example of adding AT to an MG unit, named it MG AT to keep it simple. So the first one is what that MG infantry unit looks at the brigade scale, and then the custom derivative, which is we've added 20 AT units, or 20 the 20 AT guns, which is the 2 subunits of AT to each line unit. You have 5 line units here, so it's times 5, which is where you're getting the 100 AT guns from. This can be a great way to get subunits to OHQ formations that aren't normally in them. Big examples here, if you're playing a game where aircraft become a big thing, is flak and man pads. By default, none of the OHQs have any AA assets in them. So this is a way to put dedicated AA assets in your formations. It's also a way to put in things like AT that don't normally appear in them, or mechanized artillery. There's a couple different subunit types that don't normally appear in OHQ units. This is a way you can get them into these formations. OHQ formations also change a little bit with size. When you upsize them to the next size up, you get about a 3 to about 4.5 times size increase for each of the different subcomponents of subunits. It's a little inconsistent, which is why I'm showing it here as an example. And frequently, in most games, you don't need to upsize them. Upsizing them are usually so you can get more subunits in a particular hex. So on many maps, you're going to be happy with just the brigade size. So I'm going to be very light touch here, talking about core and army size. Just remember, you're going to get about 3 to almost a 4.5 size increase on them. As a general rule, if you sort of sum all the subunits together, it's actually about 3.6 size increase, I believe, every time. With the ground OHQs covered, we're going to have this little bit here on air OHQs. Air OHQs are the units that represent the location for an Air Force command. Plays a similar role to that of the ground HQ. Unlike the ground HQ, does not come with units. Instead, all units have to be manually attached to it. By default, when you form this, it will make 3 subunits of game start infantry. I didn't do any testing to see if it actually pulls from your manpower pool when you do this. It's just when you make the OHQ, poof, wherever you make it, you get 3 subunits of game start infantry. The infantry can be upgraded like any of your other infantry. It costs 15 political power to form, which makes it more expensive in political power terms than the ground OHQs, and is used to command air units. So that we're getting pretty close to the end of this presentation. I'm going to go over my go-to OHQ formations. Very early game, light infantry. Light infantry all the way. I don't have the funds early game to do anything fancier than that. A nice additional thing is to motorize them if you've got the oil to support that. Motorized light infantry are much better than normal light infantry, especially from a maneuver standpoint. A lot of early combat can be solved in maneuver. If you can encircle a force and attack them from multiple sides, get big bonuses. So motorizing them is very effective. If I haven't been able to motorize them, I'm getting far enough in the game where I have the staff council and get a bit picky. with what OHQs I'm using. I like to jump from light infantry to infantry MG RPGs, also known as the Grenadier Infantry. This gives them good defensive options, both against other infantry, in the case by adding the MGs, and the lighter vehicles in the case of the RPGs. Once I have oil and the staff council, I like to do motorized or mechanized siege Grenadier Infantry. I tend to avoid siege modified infantry until I can motorize or mechanize them, because artillery tends to be a bit bad from maneuver phase without towing vehicles to move it around. I also tend to like my tanks, whether light tanks or armored tanks, in pure formation, so I tend to like the pure light tank or the pure armored formations for those applications. An honorable mention being the MG infantry and the RPG infantry as stopgaps before I have Grenadier infantry for specific applications. So if I'm facing a majorly infantry armed force and I want higher quality blocking or attacking units, adding MG in them makes them tougher. Conversely, if I'm dealing with vehicles, adding RPGs to infantry is a very effective way of dispersing your RPGs across the line to sort of prevent breakthrough vehicle attacks. And here we'll close up with the outro. I'll try to make a future video discussing use cases, like what your options are for recon, soft or hard defense, soft attack, and hard attack, for example. This is definitely a scenario where, because this was an overview, I didn't want this overview to get too long, and if we're trying to cover all the use cases, that matrix gets very large very quickly. So I think each of those is going to warrant basically a specific video, and probably a specific video for recon, a specific video for defensive fire, a specific video for attacking, maybe potentially specific types of attack, right? So when you're attacking, you can pick what you're attacking. When you're defending, the enemy kind of gets to pick what's attacking you. So you kind of want all-around defense. When you're attacking, you can be a bit pickier. This overview video has been mostly value-free discussion of units to keep the overview reasonably short, and because the sort of value discussions on a lot of these units can get off into the weeds really quickly. So I think we want to sort of restrain and put those in their own video. For example, when we get to discussing recon, I think that wants to be just a video on recon. And that's all we're going to be talking about on those units. Feel free to point out any obvious mistakes so I can go back and correct them. I am slightly at the moment rushing this out to try to get it out before the DLC drops on the 9th. And hopefully the DLC on the 9th does not make any major changes to this, so it will need minor edits, if any, when that comes out. With that, I hope you have been enjoying the game, or will in the future enjoy the game, and that this overview helps you. Again, this is sort of a prerequisite to introduce you to the units. In the next one will probably be recon unless something comes up. We'll go into sort of more nitty-gritty on specifically what units will work best in that row, or best in that role. But for this one, this is a basic overview to give you an understanding. Like when I say, oh, use an RPG infantry unit, so you know what an RPG infantry unit is, and not go like, oh, that's the independent unit that's just RPG, for example. Because no, in that situation, I'm talking about the mixed infantry RPG unit. So getting that out of the way, I think, will help for potentially understanding future videos. So with that, I hope you've all enjoyed. If you're watching this on YouTube, I do try to stream nightly to Twitch under the username Willcol100. This is being uploaded in its edited form to YouTube under the username Willcol100. I'll try to put a Reddit post linking to this video on Reddit when it's uploaded so that people can find it. And the plan right now is I have some family stuff coming up where I'm actually probably going to be out for a week. As soon as I get open slot in the streaming schedule, we're probably going to be doing a game at Shadow Empire. That'll probably after the DLC comes out. I'm not sure if I'm going to pick the DLC up right away. I might intentionally do a game without the DLC to see what the patch that comes along with the DLC does independent of the DLC. So I'm going to do a compare and contrast. But we'll figure that out when that time comes. So with that, I'm going to wish you all the best of luck and a good time until the next part and or stream or video, depending on where and how you're watching this. With that, bye for now.